September 2018, a marine survey team working in the Black Sea pulled up sonar data that stopped everyone in the room cold. 280 feet below the surface, sitting on an anoxic seabed where almost nothing decays, was a Roman warship. Not pieces of a warship, not an anchor and some scattered amphora, a complete vessel, hull intact, mast still standing, rowing benches still in position, 2,000 years old and looking like it had been set down there last week. The team released photographs, they released the sonar scans, they released a statement confirming the discovery and its extraordinary preservation. They described the hull construction, the mast, the rudder, the deck fittings. The international press ran the story within 48 hours. Archaeological journals cited it within months. And then quietly, the cargo was never described. Not in the press release, not in the follow-up academic papers, not in the documentary footage that aired in 2019. Every public account of this ship tells you what the ship looks like. None of them tell you what was inside it. If you want to understand why that matters and what the silence around that cargo might actually mean, you need to hear this from the beginning. Subscribe right now because this story goes places the press release did not. The Black Sea Maritime Archaeology Project began in 2015. It was a joint effort between institutions in the United Kingdom, Bulgaria, and several partner universities. The stated mission was to map the ancient coastline of the Black Sea, which had been dramatically lower during the last ice age, and to document the archaeological record of human settlement that would have been submerged as sea levels rose. The project used remotely operated vehicles equipped with high-definition cameras and precision sonar to survey the seabed at depths ranging from a few hundred feet to over a mile. What the project found over 3 years of survey work was extraordinary by any measure. They documented over 60 shipwrecks spanning more than 2,000 years of maritime history. Greek trading vessels, Byzantine ships, Ottoman galleys, each one preserved in the cold, oxygen-depleted water of the deep Black Sea with a clarity that would have been impossible in any other body of water on Earth. The Black Sea is unique in the world for this reason. Below approximately 500 feet the water is anoxic, essentially no dissolved oxygen. The organisms that break down wood and organic material cannot survive. A ship that sinks into the deep Black Sea does not rot. It does not get eaten by wood-boring mollusks. It simply settles into the sediment and stays there, preserved in a state that archaeologists elsewhere can only dream about. Most of the wrecks the project found were cargo vessels, trading ships that had moved grain, wine, oil, timber, and manufactured goods around the ancient Black Sea economy for centuries. These ships are valuable historically. Their cargo manifests the trade networks of their era. They tell you which ports were connected, which goods moved in which directions, and roughly when those trade relationships existed. But the wreck found in September 2018 was not a cargo vessel, at least not primarily. The hull design was military. The construction indicated a vessel built for speed and maneuverability rather than cargo capacity. The rowing bench arrangement was consistent with a Roman Liburnian, a class of warship used extensively by Rome from the late Republic through the imperial period. Smaller than a trireme, faster than a merchant vessel, designed to operate in both open water and the more confined waterways of rivers and coastal straits. The question of what a Roman warship was doing in the Black Sea in the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era has an answer that is historically documented and not mysterious. Rome maintained a naval presence in the Black Sea under a fleet designation called the Classis Pontica. The fleet operated primarily from bases in what is now northern Turkey and the coast of what is now Romania. Its mission was to protect Roman commercial interests in the region, project Roman military power into the kingdoms around the sea's perimeter, and maintain supply lines for the legions stationed in the provinces bordering the Black Sea. A Roman military vessel in the Black Sea is not an anomaly. It is exactly what you would expect to find. The question is not why the ship was there. The question is what it was carrying when it went down, why that information has not been made public, and what exactly the researchers have seen in those 2,000-year-old holds. The press materials from the Black Sea Maritime Archaeology Project describe the Roman warship in considerable visual detail. The hull is described as being in exceptional condition with the timber surface still clearly showing tool marks from the original construction. The mast is described as standing upright, still held in its step fitting, with portions of rigging visible around its base. The deck is described as largely intact with various fittings still in their original positions. The cargo is described in the press materials as present. That word, present, appears in the initial press release and in the follow-up documentation made available to journalists. The cargo is present. What the cargo consists of, the press materials do not say. This is unusual. It is not how archaeological discoveries of this significance are typically reported. When a Roman merchant wreck is found anywhere in the Mediterranean, the first thing described after the hull condition is the cargo, because the cargo is the historical data. The cargo tells you the ship's purpose, its route, its origin port, its destination, and its place in the economic and military geography of the ancient world. For a military vessel, the cargo question is even more pointed. Warships carried specific categories of materiel: weapons, supplies for the crew, equipment for naval operations, in some cases military payroll in the form of currency, in some cases diplomatic or strategic documents. In the case of vessels operating as part of an imperial fleet, the cargo manifest would reflect not just logistics, but the specific mission the ship was engaged in when it went down. None of that has been publicly described for this ship. The researchers who conducted the survey are professionals at institutions with strong reputations. The project director was Dr. John Adams of the University of Southampton, one of the leading maritime archaeologists in the world. The team included specialists in Roman naval history, ancient seafaring technology, and underwater documentation methodology. These are not people who would overlook a cargo description in their public reporting. They are people who understand exactly how significant that information is. Which means the absence of a cargo description is a deliberate choice, not an oversight, not a gap in the data. A decision was made not to describe what was found inside that ship, and that decision has been maintained across 5 years of public communication about the discovery. The reasons for such a decision fall into a relatively short list of categories. The first is ongoing excavation protocol. If the cargo has not been physically recovered, researchers may be withholding description to prevent unauthorized salvage attempts. Precise GPS coordinates and cargo descriptions published together create a roadmap for looters. This is a standard concern in underwater archaeology and represents legitimate practice. But the project has not stated that the cargo description is being withheld for security reasons. That explanation would itself be part of the public record if it were the explanation. The second possibility is jurisdictional complexity. The wreck lies in Bulgarian territorial waters. Anything found on the Bulgarian seabed is subject to Bulgarian law regarding cultural heritage. If the cargo includes items that raise questions about ownership, national patrimony, or prior legal claims, the description might be withheld while legal frameworks are established. This would be consistent with standard practice and would not necessarily indicate anything unusual about the cargo itself. But again, this explanation has not been offered publicly. The third possibility is the one that should make you pay close attention. The cargo contains something that changes what we know. Not something dangerous, not something illegal in the modern sense, but something historically significant enough that the researchers want to control the circumstances under which that information enters the public record. A significant numismatic hoard that would rewrite the economic history of the classis Pontica. Documentary materials that survived in the anoxic water and that are still being analyzed. Evidence of cargo inconsistent with the ship's known military designation. Something that, once described, will generate immediate and intense scrutiny that the researchers want to be fully prepared for before triggering it. Archaeological careers have been built and destroyed by the circumstances under which major discoveries are announced. A discovery announced too early, before the analysis is complete and the interpretation is defensible, invites challenge and revision that can undermine the significance of the find. Researchers who have spent years building toward a career-defining publication have strong incentives to control the timing of disclosure precisely. The Roman warship in the Black Sea was documented in 2018. It is now 2026, 8 years of silence on the cargo. That is a long time to be preparing an announcement. The Roman military presence in the Black Sea is a topic that mainstream classical scholarship has not fully resolved. The classis Pontica is documented in Roman sources and in inscriptions, but its actual operational history is fragmentary. We know the fleet existed. We know it operated from bases at Trapezus, which is modern Trabzon in Turkey, and at Tomis, which is modern Constanta in Romania. We know it was involved in the campaigns of the emperors Trajan and Hadrian along the Danube frontier. We know it occasionally projected Roman naval power into the interior of the Black Sea region in support of diplomatic and military operations. What we do not have is a clear operational record for the fleet's activities in the period between its documented establishment under Nero and the major Danubian campaigns of the 2nd century. That gap in the record is roughly 50 years of naval operations in one of Rome's most strategically important regional theaters. A warship sunk during that period with its cargo intact could fill portions of that gap in ways that are genuinely significant to our understanding of how Rome operated in the region. The inscriptions we have for the classis Pontica tell us about command structures and dedications, but not about what the fleet was actually doing year to year. A ship's cargo, if it includes records, sealed documents, or even the specific types of weapons and equipment associated with particular types of missions, could anchor specific operations to specific years and locations in ways that no inscription can. This is not speculation about treasure. This is speculation about historical information, which to people who study Rome is actually more valuable. There is a second layer to this story that most coverage has missed entirely. The Black Sea Maritime Archaeology Project documented over 60 wrecks across its survey period. The Roman warship received the most public attention because of its dramatic visual preservation. But several other wrecks in the survey have cargo documentation that is equally incomplete in public records. A Byzantine trading vessel documented in the same survey season has a partial cargo description in the published papers. Amphora of the type used for wine and olive oil are mentioned. Personal items from the crew quarters are described, but the same papers note additional cargo in the forward hold without specifying what it consists of. That forward hold cargo description is marked in the research documentation with a notation that reads, under analysis. It has carried that notation for 5 years. A second wreck from what appears to be the medieval Ottoman period has no cargo description whatsoever in any public document. The hull is described. The construction method is described. The preservation state is described. Cargo nothing. A pattern across multiple wrecks from the same survey project in which cargo descriptions are consistently incomplete or absent is more significant than a single case. It suggests not individual oversight but a policy decision about what information is disclosed and what is withheld during the ongoing research phase. The policy may be entirely defensible. It may reflect exactly the kind of careful, responsible archaeological stewardship that prevents looting and ensures proper analysis. But the policy itself has not been articulated publicly, which means the public is left to notice the pattern without understanding its rationale. There is a specific detail in the photographic documentation of the Roman warship that circulated in the 2018 and 2019 press coverage that rewards close attention. In several of the high-definition images taken by the project's remotely operated vehicles, the area of the vessel that would correspond to the main cargo hold in a Liburnian-class ship is visible. The images show this area clearly. They show it is not empty. They show that something is occupying that space, multiple somethings distributed across the visible area of the hold. The objects are not described in any caption. They are not described in any accompanying text. In at least 2 of the press images, the camera angle seems deliberately chosen to document the ship's structural features while keeping the hold contents at the edge of the frame, visible enough to confirm their presence but not positioned for clear identification. That is a camera choice? Someone operating that remotely operated vehicle decided where to point the camera and how to frame the shots. The resulting images show you that there is cargo without showing you what the cargo is. That framing did not happen by accident. People who work with ROV documentation of shipwrecks understand that every shot is deliberate. You are operating expensive equipment in difficult conditions with limited time and battery capacity. Every frame is a choice. You point the camera at what you want documented. The camera choices in the publicly released images of this ship tell you that the team wanted the structural documentation on record while keeping the cargo contents controlled. This is not a criticism, it is an observation. The observation tells you that whoever is making decisions about this project understands exactly what they have and is managing the disclosure carefully. Now the question of what specifically might be in that hold requires looking at what Roman military vessels in the Black Sea region were actually doing in the 1st and 2nd centuries of the Common Era. The standard answer is fleet support operations, moving supplies, personnel, and communications between the fleet's bases along the Black Sea coast. This kind of routine logistics traffic would produce a cargo of military provisions, standard weapons, crew equipment, and possibly official correspondence in sealed containers. But the Black Sea was not just a logistics theater for Rome. It was an intelligence theater. The kingdoms around the Black Sea's perimeter, Bosporan, Colchian, Armenian, were semi-independent client states that Rome managed through a combination of military presence, diplomatic pressure, and financial subsidy. The Classis Pontica was not just moving supplies. It was projecting Roman state power into a region where that power had to be demonstrated rather than assumed. Diplomatic shipments moved through the fleet, gifts to client kings, financial subsidies in the form of coin, official communications from the emperor or his provincial representatives to the ruling families of the peripheral kingdoms. These items traveled in sealed containers under military escort for reasons that are obvious. They were valuable, they were sensitive, they were the instruments of Roman foreign policy in a region that Rome could not afford to lose. A military vessel sunk in the Black Sea carrying diplomatic cargo would be exactly the kind of find that a research team would want to fully document before describing publicly. Not because the contents are dangerous, but because the historical implications of identifying a specific diplomatic shipment to a specific destination in a specific year would require a level of scholarly preparation and peer review that takes years to complete properly. If the cargo includes sealed containers of a type associated with official Roman correspondence, or coin assemblages of a type associated with diplomatic subsidy payments, or gift objects of a type that can be associated with specific client courts, the announcement of those findings would rewrite portions of the diplomatic history of Rome's Black Sea frontier. That kind of announcement requires the research to be bulletproof before it is made. 8 years is not an unreasonable preparation period for a finding of that significance. There is another possibility that sits at a different end of the significance spectrum and is worth considering precisely because it would explain the silence in a different way. The cargo may be undescribed not because it is extraordinarily significant, but because it is inconsistent with what the ship is supposed to be. A Roman warship should not be carrying certain kinds of cargo. Warships have prescribed cargo manifests. They carry military equipment, crew provisions, and officially sanctioned freight. If the cargo of this ship includes material that suggests the vessel was being used for purposes inconsistent with its military designation, that inconsistency would require careful handling before public description. Roman military vessels were occasionally used for private commercial transport by their commanders. This was illegal under Roman law and occasionally prosecuted. If a Liburnian-class vessel went down in the Black Sea carrying amphorae of wine consigned to a private merchant, the cargo would tell you something historically interesting about the gap between Roman military regulations and actual practice. It would also require the research team to characterize the finding in a way that does not misrepresent what they found and does not create a misleading public narrative about the ship's purpose. Nuance is hard to communicate in press releases. If the cargo finding is nuanced, the safest approach is to wait until the full analysis is published in an academic context where the nuance can be properly conveyed. That too is a defensible reason for silence. It is also a reason that would not be stated publicly before the paper is published. The broader context for this story is the state of underwater archaeology as a discipline in 2024 and 2025. The technology available to researchers has advanced dramatically in the past 2 decades. ROV documentation, photogrammetric reconstruction, and environmental DNA sampling have created possibilities that did not exist when the field's methodological frameworks were established. The result is that researchers are now capable of documenting material that they are not yet fully capable of analyzing. The documentation outpaces the interpretation. When you can photograph every surface of a 2,000-year-old ship in high definition and build a 3-dimensional model accurate to within millimeters, you can see things that your analytical frameworks are not prepared to fully explain. Objects whose identification requires specialist expertise that takes time to assemble. Materials whose composition requires laboratory analysis that takes time to complete. Assemblages whose meaning requires historical interpretation that takes time to develop. The silence around the cargo of this ship may reflect not evasion but the genuine gap between what the cameras saw and what the researchers are ready to say about what the cameras saw. That is actually the most interesting version of this story. Not a cover-up, not a secret, but a moment in the history of a discipline where the tools of discovery have outrun the tools of interpretation, where researchers are sitting with documented evidence of something they cannot yet fully explain, knowing that the moment they describe it publicly they will face questions they are not yet able to answer completely. The ship is down there, 280 feet below the surface in water cold enough to preserve wood grain and rope fiber and whatever it is that sits in that hold. The remotely operated vehicles have photographed it from every angle. The sonar has mapped its dimensions. The researchers know exactly what is there. They have not told us. In the hierarchy of archaeological silences, this one sits near the top. Not because the silence suggests concealment, but because the wreck itself represents something that happens maybe once in a generation. A military vessel of a civilization that shaped the entire subsequent history of Western culture, preserved intact, with its contents undisturbed, in water that keeps organic materials stable for millennia. This is a primary source document for Roman military history sitting on a seabed in the Black Sea waiting for a researcher to be ready to read it to the world. The academic paper, when it comes, will be significant. If the cargo is what the pattern of silence suggests it might be, the paper will be more than significant. It will be the kind of finding that gets its own chapter in the next generation of textbooks on Roman imperial history, the Classis Pontica, and the ancient Black Sea world. The announcement will come in a controlled setting: a major journal, a press conference coordinated with the university's media office, a documentary either already made or filming simultaneously. This is how discoveries of this tier are released, not through a press release bullet point but through a choreographed unveiling that gives the researchers maximum control over how the finding is framed and received. Until that day, what we have is the photographs. The mast still standing in 2,000-year-old water, the rowing benches still in position, the hull still holding its shape across 20 centuries of darkness, and in the hold, visible at the edge of every carefully framed image, something that the team has seen and documented and chosen for now not to describe. The ship is real, the preservation is real, the silence is real. And somewhere in the space between what the cameras recorded and what the press release says, there is a story about the ancient world that has been waiting 2,000 years to be told and is apparently waiting a little longer. Subscribe if you want to be here when it breaks, because when this team is ready to talk, the story they tell is not going to be small.